Hi there, my name's Elaine Halligan, author of My Child's Different, and I'm delighted to say you're listening to So Booking Cool with Jewel B.
Welcome to So Booking Cool. It's Jewel B. Today's guest is a parenting expert of more than a decade. She is the director at the Parent Practice and the author of the new must-read book, My Child's Different, the lessons learned from one's family's struggle to unlock their son's potential. She is Elaine Halligan. Elaine Halligan, so thrilled. Hi. I'm so thrilled to talk to you today, and I'm sure the audience is going to get so much out of our chat today. How's it going?
It's my pleasure to be here. I'm so delighted to be on your podcast. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Of course. So please tell us about My Child's Different.
Sure. So this is a true story. It's a human interest story about my son, Sam, who I have to say is now a young adult. He's 23. And he had a really, really tricky start to life. He was expelled from 3 schools in so many years by the age of 7. So if you could imagine, as parents, we were in a desperate state. We were in a crisis. We had a young boy who had been named the Alphabet Kid, and his sense of self-worth was completely shattered. And yet I kind of sensed, Jewel, that he was a good kid, despite all his behavior. Despite all the misbehavior, I just had this sense that what I was looking at was a rock covered in mud. And it was my job, together with my husband, to kind of whittle away that mud to see what was underneath. And sure enough, over the course of many years, the mud came off, and what was revealed was a kind of sparkling diamond. So the book just tells what we can do as parents to help children who may be different learners or who may be just a little atypical. It's what we can do to help them develop into thriving, resilient adults. And it's about maximizing potential. It's about looking for their strengths. And that's the story, My Child's Different.
Wow, that's powerful already. Elaine, so do you mind getting into why Sam was being expelled? What was going on?
Sure. So from a very young age, I just sensed he was different. He was very intense. He had a temperament that was very intense, very explosive. So he'd go from 0 to 100 really quickly. He was very impulsive, meaning he couldn't press a pause button. And he was super sensitive. And the behavior actually started at nursery school, where I'd be met at the door at pickup, and the teacher would always say to me, Mrs. Halligan, we have not had a good day. It was always the royal we. And I'd be told, he's not listening. He doesn't share nicely. He can't stand in line without pushing other children. Oh my goodness, he needs constant attention. He's distractible on the carpet time. He's quick to anger. Oh my God, it just went on and on and on. And very quickly in the early years, the preschool years, he was suddenly labeled as the naughty one. And I guess it's really uncomfortable, but if I look back to what my behavior was like at that time, we punished him. Yeah? We punished him for behavior that eventually we realized he just couldn't help. So I think the signs that he was different were there from an early age. Mm-hmm. But of course, by the age of 7, things have got very bad, and Sam would pathologically avoid situations in the classroom. And I don't know whether you noticed in the book, there is one chapter where he lets the farmyard animals out. He thinks that these farmyard animals at school should be living on the common. Mm-hmm. So he had best intentions. He lets the farmyard animals out, and they migrate down to the busiest road in London. And so Sam Halligan is responsible for kind of causing a 3-hour tailback in London that morning. And so he's labelled as the naughty one, and he did it just because, he just would do anything to get out of the classroom situation. So, his behavior was challenging for parents and teachers.
So it sounds like the labeling process started from when he was in nursery school. For as young
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
The labeling started by other parents and teachers, and then we went down the
oh.
route of kind of, yeah, so if we think about it, labeling comes in all sorts of different ways, but the labeling started quite young by other people observing him and labeling him as naughty. And then eventually, around about the age of 7, we had to get some diagnostic testing done, where he started to see psychiatrists and psychologists, and then a plethora of kind of diagnostic labels were dumped on him.
What was that like for your family, him having to take those tests?
I just remember feeling completely exhausted. I frequently felt overwhelmed. I was confused. And then I became resentful, actually, that Sam was taking up so much of our time. And that I'd just become, what can I say, Jewel, like a child rearing unit. And I found myself doing all the things that didn't work, and I just felt utterly confused when he suddenly had about 6 labels to him. And I don't know whether these will mean much for your listeners, but he was labeled ASD, Autistic Spectrum Disorder. Then he was labeled SID, which is Sensory Integration Dysfunction. We then got a label of ADD, Attention Deficit Disorder, ODD, Oppositional Defiance Disorder, and the day he was diagnosed with PDA. Have you heard of PDA, Jewel?
Not in this capacity. What does it mean?
Well, it doesn't mean public displays of affection.
Right.
It's pathological demand avoidance. And I think the day we got that diagnosis, I just came home and cried. I just cried because Sam had suddenly become the alphabet kid. And of course, with all these different labels, what happens is society judges children who are labeled and who are different. So I would say that was one of my lowest parenting moments, coming out of the clinics and getting all those labels. Yeah, it was a really bad time in our lives.
Were these the same doctors who were giving these labels? I mean, well, not labels, but diagnosing.
Diagnoses.
Yeah.
I would say there was a team of multidisciplinary team of specialists in one center. So they worked together as a team, but yeah, that they were as confused about how was Sam presenting as we were as parents. And I have to say it was a very confusing picture that now, 15 years on, I think it's taken me years to understand that actually Sam was suffering extreme anxiety because he found things too challenging. And also he's severely dyslexic. So the end result was actually this kid has severe dyslexia, so profound that he couldn't read and write, still can't effectively, but has incredibly managed with all the tools and resources out there to sit exams using a reader and a scribe and to use lots of voice recognition software. So there are so many ways around coping with a specific learning need like dyslexia now. So he's kind of survived and surviving in adult life.
Elaine, I want to know, did you as a family and did Sam, was there any support going for you guys?
So I am very supported by my immediate family. I have a wonderfully supportive husband. And in the book it talks about him actually giving up work for a 6-month period to support me and to support Sam, which was just, it was the most incredible selfless act. And I absolutely get there are not many families out there who could have done that. I also was supported by my mother and father, who are really key figures for me. I always say, Jewel, that 80% of parenting is modeling. and my parents just modeled some wonderful ways of being. So I've always had a very kind of positive, optimistic outlook to life, despite all life's knocks. So yeah, I did feel very, very supported by my family. I have to confess, though, at times I felt unsupported by some of my school community. And I realize now that was all due to them not understanding Sam's behavior, perhaps being a bit frightened by it, perhaps not wanting their own children to adopt some of the habits that Sam was getting. So I absolutely understand it. We are very fearful of behavior that we don't understand.
How can parents raise a child's self-esteem?
Oh, Jill, that is a great question. That is the million-dollar question. Raising self-esteem is about using the power of your words. It's about being positive, and it's about paying attention to what you want, because we get more of what we pay attention to. But the sad reality, and I don't know whether this will kind of resonate with you, is that there is something in society where there's a negativity bias. Yeah? Inadvertently, we are critical without meaning to be. So, our child writes a sentence, and if there's a spelling mistake, it's very difficult not to point out the spelling mistake. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Because we want to help them fix, we want to correct it. We want to make sure they don't make the same mistake again. So it's very tempting to point out what our children are getting wrong. And I think there's a scientific reason for this. There's something called the reticular activating system. It's part of the brain that searches whatever it is we're currently focused on. And it filters out everything else that's not important. So I'll give you a really practical example. If you're buying a new car, I don't know, a Volkswagen Golf or something, you suddenly go into your local town and you start seeing Volkswagen Golfs everywhere. I don't know whether you've noticed that. And you go, oh, look at that. My neighbour's got a Volkswagen Golf. There's a Volkswagen Golf at the traffic lights. And suddenly, our brain is programmed to look for evidence to support what we think is important, which is buying a new car. Now, the same thing happens in family life. If our reticular activating system believes that, let's think of an example, that we've got a messy child, and they suddenly dump their shoes and book bag in the middle of the floor, the negativity bias means we will comment on that, and we'll go, oh, for God's sake, how many times do I have to tell you to put your shoes in the shoebox? And we may spectacularly have missed the coat hanging up. Does that make sense?
No, it does. It does make sense. The negativity bias then is affecting.
It means that we're critical without really meaning to be. Mm-hmm. So how do you raise a child's self-esteem? You start changing that negativity bias. You start noticing more and more about the good things they do. And here's the top tip for your listeners. We need to praise descriptively, not evaluatively. So Jill, how we all do the evaluative praise. Mm-hmm. Good boy, girl, well done, you're amazing. Oh, I'm so proud of you, you're a superstar, you're just the best. It's positive, but actually children don't believe it. It'll go in one ear and out the other because it's a bit superfluous. So we need to do praise that's much more descriptive. We need to look for effort. We need to look for attitude. We need to look for progress and results. So if your child comes home with a spelling test, and gets 8 out of 10, the negativity bias would mean, which 2 did you get wrong? Yeah? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Whereas being more descriptive about it says, whoa, good for you. You should feel proud of yourself for the 8 out of 10 because that's indicative of all the extra work you put in. That 10 minutes every day practicing your spellings has really paid off. Last week you got 6 out of 10, and this week you've got 8 out of 10. Wow, that is real progress. You should feel proud of yourself. And that's descriptive praise, and it is a magical way of building up self-esteem.
Does it also help a child to become a happy, motivated learner?
Oh my God, that's another great question. You're absolutely right. Happy, motivated learners, it's all about children feeling able, feeling worthy, feeling competent, feeling confident, and absolutely, descriptive praise really, really works to ensure they have what we call a growth mindset, and that they start to give things a go and not fear failure. So yeah, that is one element of creating a happy learner, definitely.
What are the others?
There are other things we can do, and I think in order to be a happy learner, you have to be quite resilient, because there'll be times in life where you don't get it right. Yeah? where the work will be quite hard and you'll feel like giving up. So it's really important we as parents kind of foster resilience, and we can do that through another skill, which is all to do with emotion coaching, to help our kids kind of respond better to stress. I don't know what the American education system is like, but here in London, a lot of our children are suffering from stress, from feeling overly competition, and from challenges. And in order to help them cope with this, we need to help them cope with their feelings. So a great skill to use is to emotion coach. And really simply, it's about kind of looking behind your child's actions and imagine how they're feeling. So a quick example, it can be really hard to get started on a piece of homework if you feel you're not going to do well. Or, I know how challenging it is for you to do your math homework when multiplication isn't your favorite subject. And so by just letting them know that you understand how they feel and what their feelings are, again, it helps them kind of be more problem solvers.
I love that advice, Elaine. And yeah, that is in the American education system. Yeah, the children and students go through that too. Also, I think we should touch on how can parents cope when a child is acting out in public?
Gosh, that's another great question. And it's so embarrassing, isn't it? I bet all parents have been in that position where they've had what I call an LPM, a low parenting moment. And in my book, Jewel, I mentioned Sam on a train kicking another passenger.
Oh.
And it was the most humiliating experience of my life. And it's an interesting story, actually. I kind of berated him. I told him to stop. I criticized him. I kind of punished him, and his behavior just got worse and worse and worse. And what happened was this lady who was kind of getting kicked suddenly turned to me and said, "Oh my God, your child needs discipline. What they need is a darned good smack." And at that point, I stood up in this kind of crowded train, whereas, making eye contact with other passengers is frowned upon. And I found myself making a speech. And I said to people, I am not going to punish my child for having a problem. And I think at that point we were told that he was on the spectrum. So I said, I am not going to punish my child for being autistic. He needs my help. And will you please help me leave the train at the next station? Well, Jill, what happened next was just incredible. The whole carriage descended into an argument about how we discipline children, how we should cope, whether smacking was right or wrong. And suddenly Sam, who'd been acting out, just sat as meek, as mild as a lamb and just watched all the adults around him behaving like they were in a slagging match. So it was such a powerful incident of how difficult it is to cope when your child acts out in public. But the one thing I would say is that all behavior has a cause, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
There's always a reason for children acting out, and what we need to do is take action in the moment just to help them calm down. Because I can promise this, if you berate them and punish them and criticize them, it will inevitably, in my experience, lead to more rebellion and resentment. So it's about taking them away to a safe place, trying to do the emotion coaching, trying to name their feelings to tame them, helping them calm down and bring their kind of brain back into a balanced state. Then, only then, can you start thinking about consequences or about problem solving. But I don't think there's a parent out there who hasn't gone through the experience of being kind of humiliated and embarrassed in public. It's probably one of the worst parenting moments we can have.
And I just want to know, and I know the listeners would want to know too, how has Sam overcome all of this, would you say? And what does he think of My Child's Different?
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh, that's a really good question too. How has he overcome? So, he's overcome many of his difficulties. I think firstly was by us getting him into the right educational environment. That's absolutely key, isn't it? getting an environment that understands him and can support him. So we did get him into the right environment where he was able to flourish in his creative subjects, yes, such as product design and fine art and pottery, and that's where he flourished. And the second thing that made him flourish was us changing the way we are with him. So, we learned the positive parenting skill to really empathize with him, but still be firm. And so there were 3 simple things we did. We were more positive, but we were still firm with our boundaries, and my husband and I got back into being more consistent. Firm, positive, and consistent. And instead of that parenting pendulum swinging between kind of laissez-faire and punitive, we kind of found more balance. So that really helped Sam. It helped bring out the best in him because he knew where he stood and he knew that he was going to get an empathetic response from us. Your second question, how does Sam feel about the book?
Yes.
I have to tell you, Jewel, I was so nervous writing it. I couldn't write it until I got my son's permission, so I waited till he was 21. And I said to him, Sam, there's a really good story because, you have seen transformational results in your life in terms of what you've achieved, and I think there's a story to be told. And his response was, I'm really proud of what I've achieved in life. Given where I've come from, I think we should tell the story.
Wow.
So I interviewed him. For the best part of a year. Transcribed all his interviews, and what came out were things that I didn't know. It was very powerful. It was very emotional and upsetting in points, where he told me the impact it had on him being placed in solitary confinement, the impact of being restrained in some educational environments. And all I can say, Jewel, is there were a lot of tears along the way. A lot of tears, a lot of upset. But at the end of it, Sam kind of came to me and joked, and he said, Mum, do you know what? Thanks for doing that. You've probably saved me thousands of pounds in therapy.
Wow.
So it was just good to tell the story, yeah? We needed to kind of go through that and relive what happened. How is Sam about the book today? I think he's completely nonplussed. I don't think he has any idea. He's just in his own little land. I don't think he really understands what impact that this book seems to be having on other parents. And people are writing to say, just thank you for having the courage to write the story. And I have to confess, I was so nervous, Jewel, before the book was published last year, because I just didn't know what the reaction was, and it's a deeply personal story. But I think it's really helping parents, and the message that's coming through from people is just thank you for giving us hope and for giving us optimism. So yeah, I think it was worth doing. Yeah.
Elaine Halligan, everyone. Oh my goodness. Mm-hmm. Elaine, it was such a pleasure to talk with you. I would love to talk to you again because there's so much to cover. Like
there's a lot in the book. Yeah.
How can people keep up with you and learn more about you and My Child's Different?
So we have a website called The Parent Practice. So it's www.theparentpractice.com. We're on Facebook and Twitter using that handle, The Parent Practice. And if anyone is interested in reading the story, I think Amazon.com is probably your best bet over in the States. But yeah, hook up with us on Facebook. Love talking to other parents. So yeah, let's try and keep this conversation going.
Yes, absolutely. Are there any final words that you'd like to say, Elaine?
I think my final message to parents is try and use the power of your influence and not the influence of power to help your children develop into competent, confident adults. Use the power of your words to build self-esteem.
I love that. Thank you again, and thank you so much to all the listeners. And until next time, so booking cool.